Thank you very much for coming tonight, everybody. Before we move forward, I'd like to touch base again with and acknowledge some of the folks that are here for us. From Senator Bonasek's office, there's Krista Barringer. From Assemblyman Lopez's office, Tracy McGee. From Senator Gillibrand's office, Susan Spears. The County Controller, Elliot Auerbach. Kelly Myers, the supervisor from Sorgeties, is with us. Thank you, Kelly. Carl Chipman, the Rochester Town Supervisor. Gary Bellows, the Hurley Town Supervisor. Terry Rosenblum from the Woodstock Town Board. John Dwyer, the Chair of the Ulster County Community College. And Steve Noble, representing Mayor Gallo. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a moment a long time coming. It's an opportunity, not for me, it's an opportunity for the people of Ulster County to have their voices heard. This is a unique opportunity because it's a chance for us to have high-level representatives from the DEP and DEC in one room, and the ability to be able to listen to them and to also to talk to them. I want to thank Carter Strickland, the Commissioner of the DEP for New York City, for joining us tonight. And I want to thank Mark Gersman, again, the Deputy Commissioner for the DEC, the State DEC, for joining us as well. And again, thank each and every one of you for attending tonight. Before I open it up to, and give the same courtesy again to the DEP and the DEC, I'd like to have a few words as a lifelong resident of Ulster County. You know, there are three issues that I believe we have to touch base on tonight. Actually, there's probably much more, but there's three that I'll touch on. First and foremost, unnatural flooding in Wawarsing. The second is what I believe is the failure to pay their fair share of property taxes throughout Ulster County. And last but not least is what I believe is a travesty in the Lower Esopus. Let's talk briefly about what we have. Wawarsing. The people of Wawarsing, for how long now? 3, 5, 10? How many years has it been that cracks in the aqueduct, unnatural flooding has occurred, and these people have had to live in conditions you can only imagine if you see it firsthand? Fountains erupting in their basements, mold, places you would never want to be forced to live, they are forced to live. And ultimately, what was brought forward was a potential buyout program. When I looked at the numbers, it doesn't cover half the houses. It's simply not enough. When we talk about paying their fair share of property taxes, I'm sure you'll hear from a town supervisor or two tonight. You know what they are faced with? Some very difficult decisions. First and foremost, they can take on the New York City DEP when they come to lower their assessment. And then when they bring their mountain of attorneys with them, they can try that. And it will cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars and drive them to a place near bankruptcy. It's the same money, by the way, that would be used to pay for roads, plows, local shares of taking care of a whole host of issues to serve local people. So they have to make a choice. They can either fight them in court or they can somehow settle for something less than their fair share. Well, the problem is when they pay less than their fair share, the people of Ulster County have to pay more than their fair share. And what it results in is Ulster County residents subsidizing New York City water rates. And that is fundamentally unfair. And what I have said, it's un-American. I guarantee you if the leaks in Wawarsing were happening in Queens, they'd be fixed tomorrow. Now let's talk about the Lower Esopus. The people along the Lower Esopus have had to make some very interesting choices. The choices that they have to make is, are they going to be okay with being flooded on a very regular basis because the Metropolitan New York City DEP decides to keep the water levels in the reservoir simply too high? And why are they too high? Is it because they haven't undertaken major conservation efforts in the city? I don't know. Is it because they have significant loss of water on the way to New York City? I don't know. What I do know is this. Every time there's a major storm, the people along the Lower Esopus are flooded. And it's simply unacceptable. So what's the other choice? The other choice they have left us with, again, it's mud or flood. So the other choice is 600 million gallons of concentrated muddy water flowing down the lower Esopus and spewing into the Hudson River. It's not water that makes it to New York City. I guess it's severely diluted maybe when it gets there, but I'll tell you what happens to that water. It makes a right-hand turn, heads down the Hudson River, and runs flat into the drinking water intake for the town of Esopus. Can I ask you a question? When did the health of a child in Esopus in Ulster County become less important than a child in Manhattan? All of these things collectively led me to discuss having Mayor Bloomberg come here personally. Now, I don't think that was too much to ask, to be quite frank with you. If I was the mayor of New York City, what I would say is a place where a large percentage of my water comes from is obviously having serious, serious issues. And I need to see this firsthand. I would gladly be able to show him personally what's going on, take him to a war scene, show him what's happened in people's basements, tell him what they're forced to live in, show him what's happening along the lower Esopus. And I got plenty of accounts that would show him what's going on with the taxes. What I'm telling you is this: it was a reasonable request. We have the support of virtually every elected official in our area in that request. Again, a very reasonable situation. And it led us to be able to discuss the concept of an occupying nation. You see, what we have here is very different than many other places in our nation. We have another municipality that rules over us in many, many ways. Now let's talk about this occupying nation concept. What does an occupying nation do? It comes in, brings their own police force, right? Sound familiar?
Yes.
It doesn't follow local rules and regulations. It follows their own rules and regulations. You know what else it does? It extracts a natural resource far below the amount of money it would draw in a fair market value. And then you know what it does? It stands on the indigenous people. The problem is we are the indigenous people. And this is America, and it's not right. Now, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. But I think it's important to understand this is very much a business equation. When businesses look to be able to cut their expenses and they don't want to raise the price, again, there's no appetite for an increase in water rate in the metropolitan New York area. Then what the business does is it stands on its supply chain. It squeezes the weakest links and forces it to do everything for less money. And that's where they get the money out of, because it has to come from someplace. The problem, again, we are the supply chain. So what we're hoping for is to have a significant change in the relationship between the people of Ulster County and the people of New York City. But it's not the people of New York City, because we fully embrace the importance of providing water to 9 million neighbors. We get it. We love that New York City is a spectacular place. We root for the Giants too. What we have in front of us here is an opportunity. And that's what tonight can really be, an opportunity for the people of Ulster County to have their voices heard. But what I hope we hear tonight, and the hope we provide, is an opportunity for the New York City DEP to begin making the fundamental changes we believe are necessary in the relationship if we're going to move forward and not fight every inch of the way. So when we talk tonight, please don't talk about how much taxes the DEP pays unless they're willing to talk about how much they avoid. Can we please do another favor? Let's not talk about the jobs they create unless they're willing to talk about the jobs that they crush with stifling regulations. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an opportunity tonight. The people of Ulster County bring a genuine decency to the situation, and they want things to be better. Now the question is, do we have a partner? And is the DEC going to step into the situation and again push this issue to make sure we have a partner? Ladies and gentlemen, this is New York State. This is America. We are one New York. And I don't want this to be the upstate, downstate battleground. But I will tell you one thing. I will not go away. I will fight for the people of Ulster County. And we're going to make damn sure that things change here in Ulster County. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Do you want me to go next? Do you want me to go next? Sure. It'll be better, I think. No, that's all.
Thompson. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters for Ulster County and Dutchess County as well. But our concentration of members are here in Ulster, and we're concerned about this issue too, and are glad to have this forum here. My role is simply to moderate and you're going to be coming up and asking questions in order that you signed up. I think it's going to only be as good as you make it, so please think about your questions, keep them as fact-based and informational as possible so that they're really hearing from us. Also, remember that the DEC is here, but this is primarily a discussion with the DEP and the DEC, so keep your questions directed in that way. We will not censor you if you get, unless you're wildly off topic, but again, there are so many people who want to ask questions, you kind of have a responsibility to each other, so please keep that in mind. And also, the room is full. If you feel like leaving, that's a good thing because you'll leave some space for somebody else, especially if you have a seat. So no one will mind, no one will be offended. So with that, unless I forgot anything, folks.
Yeah.
They will begin, and it's going to be the 3 minutes for each of the panelists here, and they will give opening statements. Then you will come up in order and ask 2-minute questions, 2-minute limit, you don't have to go that long. And they have a minute limit to answer them. Good luck, guys. A minute is a short time, but you're professionals, you're gonna do it. What we hope from them is very straight answers. What we hope from you is civility and representing Ulster County in the best way possible and telling our story. Right? And
Thank you.
good, you know which one.
Good evening. Thank you very much, County Executive Hine, for convening this forum and for inviting the Department of Environmental Conservation to participate. Obviously, this is an area that is of extreme importance to the community, to the Lower Esopus, to Ulster County in general, and we are pleased to be able to listen to your concerns, to respond where we have the information, but to let you know that this process will be designed to build a partnership between City DEP, Ulster County, and the Department of Environmental Conservation. We're anxious to find solutions to the problems. These are very, very complex issues. It involves protection of the drinking water supply for 9 million people. It involves the protection of your community, and it involves protection of the ecological resources that we find in the Lower Esopus. We're very mindful of those resources. We're very mindful of the impacts that have occurred to the Lower Esopus communities, and we're here to listen and to find out more about what the concerns are and how we can help translate them into solutions. We are committed to an open process and to a public process. One of the first steps that we took was to release an interim protocol for comment, a protocol designed to understand and control the various releases that occur from the Ashokan Reservoir. We're continuing to accept comments on that protocol, and we invite you to submit them as you get the opportunity to do so. We can provide you with the website location where you can provide those comments. That will be an ongoing process, and we believe for the first time in the last year, we've developed a protocol that is public, is understandable, and is based upon science. We're not done with that protocol. We're continuing to work on that protocol, and your comments, suggestions on how we can do that are more than welcome. In addition, we will be embarking upon an environmental impact statement and environmental review of the proposed Cat Alum permit, as it's called. The environmental review will consider the scientific aspects of each of the potential releases from the Ashokan Reservoir. And we invite you, and in fact, we encourage you to participate in that process. We'll make sure that you have the opportunity. We'll work with County Executive Hine to make sure that the community is involved, and we will continue the open dialogue and discussion that we've initiated under Commissioner Martens to be able to hear what your concerns are and respond with scientifically based technical protocols to protect both the resource and the drinking water supply of 9 million people. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and your questions. To the extent that I can't answer the questions, and I'm sure you'll have many that I can't answer, we'll take them under advisement, and we'll certainly try to get back to you, either through the county executive or someone else. I'm getting a red flag. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Good evening. It's great to be here, and I'm really here to listen. We've been up here many times before. I have to say, I am now a Giants fan, but I'm a long-suffering Bills fan, so I have mixed feelings right now. I do want to thank our host, first of all, County Executive Hine, but also SUNY Ulster. We have employed over 200 SUNY Ulster grads in paid internships in the last few years, and we want to continue that relationship. As you know, DEP provides water to 8 million people in New York City and 1 million upstate residents, including here in the county, High Falls and New Paltz. We view our upstate communities as partners in that effort. We really do, and I do think as I go through this, recall maybe where we were a few years ago, I do think we've already turned that corner, and I'll explain what I mean by that. We've spent, for example, just as an example, $49 million for septic repairs, building the Boyceville wastewater treatment plant, sewer extensions, stormwater retrofits, salt storage, and the like. And we want to continue that. We know we have to invest in the county. We do pay $27 million in Ulster County taxes. I'm sure I'll get a question on that, so we'll leave the specifics there. I will say that's more than we spend in other West Hudson counties. And we also maintain, unlike other taxpayers, we do maintain our highways. But we do have an extensive presence here in the county. I know there are a number of DEP employees. Maybe you want to raise your hands for those DEP employees who are here. We have in the county 230 DEP employees. We have 750 upstate. Obviously, that's a pretty substantial presence, and that has allowed us to mobilize quickly in the wake of Hurricane Irene, most recently, and also past storms, where we've provided a lot of help to towns and counties for debris removal and now stream restoration as we turn that. Life is not all work, obviously, so we've also opened a number of our lands to recreational use, including, thank you, 12,000 in this county. Just a word about what's happened in the last few years, which has been, I think, a recognition by DEP of this relationship, some investment of time and resources in sessions like this, but also, coincidentally, maybe, some pretty extraordinary rainfall of record. In the last year, for example, we've had 3 of the top 10 storms of record. I don't have to tell you, and I know that in other places in the county, like the Wallkill River Valley, where I know a number of folks, that has been flooded out pretty regularly, almost predictably. Streams above our dams have been flooded out pretty badly, and we really feel for those folks. There's been flooding certainly downstream of our dams. I think you will see, though, that it's been much less. And for example, just take one example, Shokan Reservoir, our data shows attenuated about 85% of the flows. In other words, what came in during Hurricane Irene was about 100 CFS. What came out was 15% of that. Thank you, I'm getting the red flag. So I do think you see some pretty extensive attenuation. Obviously, there's some impacts, and we want to talk about those, but much less than upstream. I think we'll get to the other questions, the other points I want to make through the questions. But I'll close with this. I do think you've seen in the last few years requests made by stakeholders, local stakeholders in the county itself, maintain voids. We are working now, we have an interim protocol, which everybody's free to comment on, to maintain those voids. We can do it, and maybe I'll get to the chart in a question. We've been maintaining that void largely through the release channel, but there's other parts of the protocol. We've also been asked to maintain some community flows, stream-based flows. We've done that. We've been asked to take a look and develop a plan to address the leaks in Warwarsing and Roaston as well. We've done that. We've launched a $2.1 billion capital project. It's going to take a lot of effort, but we're starting now. So we've been listening, we've been making commitments, and we've been living up to those commitments. We know it's not the end of the commitments, but we think that it should set the right tone for what we're talking about tonight. Thank you.
I was given a tip that he was offered a little more time, so I was trying to be fair. When you come up and ask your questions, please state your name and where you're from. And are we ready? I also want to thank my husband, the timekeeper. He's been a league member for 40-some years, as I have, so
Check a little more.
we hope you can see the signs. He's trying to hold them up for you. Yep, he's ready. When you start talking, he'll start timing.
Okay, good. Commissioners, thank you very much for coming. My name is Gary Bellows. I've been the town of Hurley supervisor for 17 years. All of my homes have been along the Esopus Creek in Hurley. I've experienced 4 floods, and each time it has cost tens of thousands of dollars personally, which has been kind of what I was putting away from my retirement. I think some of the distrust comes from, it started out in '87 when your chief engineer stood up on the 6th floor of the legislature and said, we have no way to release water out of the reservoir. And hence, today and years before, you've been letting a lot of water out through the waste channel. So that's, I think, started it. We also noticed with the protocol to keep a void within the reservoir that after March 15th, you're going to decrease the void, yet 81% of the floods happened between March and June, and the other 2 happened in the period in the September fall period. The low water times are about 79% happen between October and February when you want to keep your void. So the voids, the way you have it set up, are doing absolutely no good. And what I would say is there's only one solution. You either drop the voids down 20% in the spring and the fall and run it 10% the rest of the time, or come to all the homeowners in the town of Hurley and offer the 2005 fair market value for their homes, buy them out, and then you can, if you want to flood there, then all you have to do is take care of the farmland. Thank you very much.
So I have a minute. If I don't get it in here, I'll probably get the response into the next question. One, thank you for your comments. And, you know, we do view it as an interim protocol, so the suggestions you've made we'll have to take a look at, certainly, in terms of the percent voids to keep. Trying to see here. You know, obviously, we are balancing the needs for drinking water and the ability to run the release channel. Thank you. So the way the interim protocol is set up now is we have some limits on when we can run the release channel. Obviously, if there's a stop point, essentially, at a downstream gauge. And in fact, we had to do that right before Hurricane Irene. The alternative, of course, is for the water to go, once we stop that release channel, water goes over the spillway, which is, doesn't provide as much attenuation, and obviously there's essentially no void. So with that, I'll stop. I'll probably to be picked up with the next question.
I'm not sure if this is on, yes. As we discussed and as Carter mentioned, the protocol is subject to public review and comment, and we invite your comments. We will work through the issues from a technical perspective to come up with the best protocol that we can, working with DEP and again with the county executive to ensure that we can do as much as we can to protect the property owners who are living along the Esopus. Again, we also have to be mindful that this is a water supply for over 9 million people, and we are going to work through these very complex and seemingly conflicting issues to harmonize the results.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank County Executive Hine for the opportunity at this forum, and thank you, both commissioners. My name is Carl Chippen. I'm the supervisor of the town of Rochester, currently in my third term. We in the town of Rochester don't receive any New York City money at all. We just receive the excess water from the Rondout Reservoir. Firmly embedded in my mind are the events leading up and after Hurricane Irene. The Tuesday before Irene hit, the reservoir level up at the Rondout Reservoir, I believe, was 97.5%. It was an exceptionally wet year. Normally, reservoir levels, I believe, are between 70 and 80% at that time. It was already forecasted that at least our area was going to get some torrential rain. We didn't know that we were deadlocked on the sites of Hurricane Irene. I started making some phone calls. I called the DEP, I called some of my neighboring supervisors. Some of it caught on because County Executive Hine on the Thursday finally announced that there was going to be water releases. My first question is, why was there so much water in the reservoir? We along the Rondout feel like we're lost souls sometimes. We've heard about the Esopus, and I agree with you. Esopus is a mess. I'm a trout fisherman. That the stream's totally destroyed. It'd be a real tourist attraction near Hershey, Pennsylvania, but it doesn't belong in Ulster County. I feel we have a real problem with balance between the needs and the safety of my citizens. I've lost businesses along 209. My pumpkins, which we have some of the greatest farmland, ended up being a sight to see down in Rosendale and into Kingston and probably down to New York City. Those farmers will never get that back. I've lost homes. This evening, the Ulster County Legislature is going to meet on a resolution, to vote on a resolution for tax relief for those that were affected by the hurricane and had more than 50% of a loss. That is being funded by local taxpayers. I don't believe it should be. The New York DEP should be paying the price, not my taxpayers.
This is for me. So, you know, I sympathize. I also happen to fish and on the Esopus and Neversink as well. And one thing I'll say about the Esopus is that the upper Esopus, our data show that the upper Esopus is very turbid. I mean, when it rains, there's natural clays. We know this. They stay suspended, much higher than what comes out of the Chandaken Tunnel. So that, you know, I know is a question that's out there, but that's what the data show. Let me see what else you use. Why so much water in the reservoir? I'll say this about the week leading up to Hurricane Irene. There's obviously the interim protocol was not out yet. There was a lot of discussion about what that should be, how it should be triggered. You know, the request was made early on, you know, last year that it should only be at the request of certain folks. Obviously, we have the you know, obligation to maintain the system, so we don't cede that. I think the protocol tries to balance some well-known points of when we start and when we stop. The predictions were lousy of the water, and what we got from the National Weather Service was about expected 3 inches of rain. I happen to know we were very much geared up in the city for a coastal path to the storm. It happened to veer and break up, and the Catskills, as they do, reached up and grabbed that water. But obviously we got way more than 3 inches of rain. So it was, forecasting is not perfect.
Let me just add is this on? Yeah. The State Department of Environmental Conservation during and after the floods, and we sympathize and understand and appreciate the devastation that's occurred in many communities in Ulster County. The governor announced that he was going to authorize spending up to $30 million to help flood-ravaged communities recover from the storms. As you know, the governor was in the communities, assessed the damage personally, and then convinced the legislature to enact essentially flooding grant programs that would help alleviate some of the damage and rectify some of the problems that are in the upstate communities, in Ulster County especially. We've also worked with many of our federal and local partners to be able to bring relief to those communities, including the Department of Environmental Protection, who have chipped in with funds to be able to do some of the work that's absolutely necessary as a result of these floods. More information will be available on our website shortly about the availability of these funds.
Next question. Name and town.
Kate Hudson, I am representing Riverkeeper. We are a member of the Ashokan Release Working Group that has been working over the last year after we were convened in January of 2011. I think that the DEC and DEP representatives here this evening know that the working group stakeholders, which include a number of Ulster County town supervisors, environmental groups, including Lower Esopus Watershed Partnership and the county, were very disappointed that we were not afforded a more active role in developing the interim protocol for releases from the Ashokan Reservoir. This was particularly so in light of DEC's and DEP's January 2011 pledge to work with a broad group of stakeholders to facilitate a frank dialogue and exchange of ideas and information to inform operational decisions and to take steps to avoid turbid releases in the future. It does not appear that either of these promises has been kept. Recently, DEP reconvened the working group, and I believe there's an opportunity presented by that, which I am afraid may be missed. Specifically, DEP has told us that they're moving forward with preparing a scope to inform preparation of an environmental impact statement. When stakeholder working group members asked what role they would be playing in helping to put together that draft scope, we were told that we would get the DEP's final draft when it was made available to the public in April. What is the role of the working group if not to provide early assistance to DEP in developing a scope that will be more likely to address the public's concerns? This failure to take advantage of the opportunity to work collaboratively with stakeholders at the table can only result in aggravating the community's frustration towards DEP. We urge DEC and DEP to open up the process of developing a draft scope to include stakeholder members of the working group and to encourage the working group meetings to be a forum for back and forth to support that development. This simple step could go a long way to repairing DEP's relationship with Ulster County and Lower Esopus communities. We again call on DEC and DEP to ensure a transparent and inclusive process that involves a comprehensive analysis of alternatives to high turbid releases to the Lower Esopus, and that leads to a permit for those releases that requires them to meet state water quality standards.
Well, DEP obviously convened that working group with the state, and we look forward to working with them. There are a few things in there that just aren't true. You said promises were not kept. This working group had the opportunity, availed itself of it very late in the day, but did, to comment on the interim protocol. You know that. Also, DEP has and will continue to offer money for technical assistance to help out in the scope. So, you know, that promise has been kept as well. With regard to scope, the more public, the better. So, you know, we're very much supportive of having public scoping sessions for this. We've got them lined up, ready to go in the spring. We have already gone out and conducted 75 on-site interviews. This was before the hurricane, in the Lower Esopus to talk to landowners, et cetera, to gather information for this scope. So we're very much committed to looking at those impacts.
I'll just reiterate that the interim protocol was sent to stakeholders for review and comment. And looking forward, we invite your comments still on the interim protocol. It's a work in progress. It was a good and important first step for us and for DEP, but we're not done with the process. So please make sure you avail yourselves of the opportunity to comment. And there will be, as Carter has suggested, further opportunity for comment during the public scoping process that will be done in connection with the environmental review.
Hi, I'm Linda Brandt, and I live in Kingston. I wish I could work up some sympathy over the drinking water that New York City receives. I live in Ulster County, and I love Ulster County. And if you look around this room, you're going to see that we are not the weakest link. What has happened to the Shokan, the reservoir? What has happened to my eagles? How are my eagles going to raise young this year? It is said that with eagles, they instinctively know not to breed if there is going to be a problem with having food for their young. What about my eagles? They can't fish. How can they fish in the Shokan Reservoir? What you have done to the reservoir and to the Esopus is criminal. If any of us did this, we would be fined and we would be jailed. It is criminal. That is what it is. And what you have done to our wildlife and to those of us who live here and love being outside and fishing and just enjoying nature, you should be ashamed.
Well, that was more of a statement than a question, but I will try to, address, those sentiments. First, there's been this notion that it's only drinking water for New York City. We know that there are 1 million people upstate that take our water, including High Falls and New Paltz. And so the quality of the water that we do, that does go down the Catskill Aqueduct very much affects what they can do and how much treatment they have. So it's a very real financial decision for people right here in the county and a public health one as well. With regard to wildlife, and we've spent a lot of money in the last 15 years on acquiring land. We've added 120,000 acres of land in the watershed. I think that's a pretty substantial commitment. We've got trained staff who are working very hard to reverse invasive species propagation. So we are very committed to that, and it's one reason why we're opening up our reservoirs, starting with Cannonsville, but expanding this year to other reservoirs to fishing. So, the fish are out there. Yes, sir.
Yes. Go ahead.
My turn? Okay. My name is Gilbert Hales. I live in Saugerties, about a mile from the lower Esopus Creek. I grew up on Long Island, and as a little kid, we'd go into New York City to go to Radio City Music Hall and things like that, restaurants and things. And then went off to college and then married someone from Colorado and went out and lived in Colorado for about 8 years. Then I had the opportunity to move back to New York, as I said. And back in New York, I was in Suffern. I went into New York City and went into operas and concerts and went to museums. And I loved New York City. I hope New York City loves us up here. But I loved it. But then moving up to Saugerties, it was a year and a half ago. The lower Esopus got muddy and everything. Before Hurricane Irene or anything like that. And I think some action should have been taken then and now. Can't something be done about that? It's just a mess. They built the diamond mill right on the Esopus Creek, and you can go and have a room there and sit out on a porch and look out at a muddy stream. That's what you look out at. That wasn't the original dream. We wanted to look out at a beautiful stream. So, as I say, I've gone to New York many times. I'd like Mayor Bloomberg to come up here and look at our place. We go down to New York all the time, look at New York. They should come up here and look at Ulster County. Let's share it. And I know a lot of people here belong to organizations that are nationwide, environmental groups, and we support environmental issues all throughout the country. And therefore, New York City should be doing the same thing. And look at our muddy creek and get it cleaned up. Is there a solution? That's my question.
So I got a minute, and I'm not gonna bring the mic with me, but I do want, maybe afterwards you can come look at this. You asked about the solution. This is a map we have of the Shokan Reservoir. And for those who may not be familiar with it, here's Lower Soapus Creek, here's the spillway, and here's the release channel, dividing we're here, West and East Basin. Here's a close-up of it. But, the options are, there's turbid water that comes down here as it comes down all the Catskill streams. It's resident here longer. Those other streams are flashier, meaning it just pushes out, means they have worse floods, higher peaks, as I mentioned here earlier, the attenuation we had during Irene. But there's the clay stays suspended here longer, obviously, because it's a lake, as it would anywhere else. Our options are release here or spill here. And that's really the options we have. I do think that there's a real choice when there's a few things that are happening. Thank you, sir. I'll wrap up. I think there's a few things that we have to look forward to in the future as we develop this interim protocol, which are when New York City finishes Croton filtration plants, which we're doing very soon, and we finish an interconnect between the Catskill and Delaware systems, we may not need Catskill water as much as we do now. Then what? What is the protocol going to be for operation of this when we're not drawing as much for drinking water purposes, and the options are even more so spillway or release channel?
Excuse me, Mr. Commissioner, with all due respect, we didn't build the reservoir system. You guys did. And so if it's faltering now, and you may not need the water, and what? We're supposed to have to live with whatever comes of that? It's simply an unacceptable answer. The answer here is very simple. You have to manage your water system, and manage it in a way that doesn't harm the people of our community.
That's what the interim protocol is a management system. And it's possible because we've invested many millions of dollars in what we call an operations support tool, which allows us to predict with greater accuracy, obviously not perfect accuracy, the amount, the demand, the amount of water that is needed, how we can maintain voids. This has been very successful in the Delaware system. We're bringing it over here. So we are getting there in terms of management. I will say earlier, Mike mentioned the overall demand in New York City has gone down precipitously. In the early 80s, it was about 200 gallons per day per person. Now it's 60. So we've invested a lot. Our water use continues to decline as our population grows. So that's more water that we can make available for upstate.
And Mark, did you want to add anything?
Well, let me say that the Department of Environmental Conservation is the regulator, and our effort will be to continue to work on this protocol, which we believe puts a management regime around these various releases, understanding that there are various competing uses for which the water has to be put. But I come back to the interim protocol, public comment opportunity for the community to participate in the process, and opening the process so that you will continue to have that presence in these discussions. And through those discussions, through commenting on the interim protocol, we are going to work towards finding solutions to these very difficult, complex issues. And we're committed to that at DEC.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Krista Behringer. I live at 1585 Route 212 in Saugerties, and I am the Ulster County Liaison for Senator John Bonasek. I will keep my comments brief. At the end of the day, the DEP is eager to talk, but barely responsive to the needs of the watershed communities, with their issues and problems that the DEP has caused and created. In the one area that they have taken responsibility, it took Senator John Bonasek finding $3.5 million of state dollars, which they may match with $3.7 million to finally accept their financial role. It should not take state funding for New York City to take responsibility and accountability for their actions. To imply that the MUD initiated this dialogue is misleading at best. Ultimately, it is easier to get a 2-year-old to take a bath than it is to get the DEP to the table to discuss tangible, realistic solutions to the issues and problems that they caused and created. Thank you.
Well, what she's referring to is a buyout program for houses in Wawarsing, and we are proceeding in parallel with the county, which is administering the program. I understand the county is working through some 60 homes they have in there to develop a protocol. So we'll, it is to be determined whether those funds are going to be exhausted. We'll see, but that's proceeding. According to plan. What you didn't mention was our commitment, and I mentioned it earlier, I'll wrap up quickly, was our commitment to put in place a very extensive repair in 2 places. One is a bypass, one is a stabilization program of the Roundout West Branch Tunnel. And that's a very significant undertaking, can represent about 90% of the supply of water to the city and the 1 million people upstate that depend on it. So that I think represents a very, very significant investment.
Mark? No?
All set.
All right. Next question.
Herman Revere, Olive Bridge, New York. This isn't nothing new between downstaters and upstaters. This has been going on for 110 years, since the reservoir's been built. Downstaters versus upstaters. It's nothing new. You keep on throwing out figures of money, but how much money do you make on the water? I'd like to know that. I'm getting off that subject. You make plenty of money on that water. Also, I pass the discharge chute every day, and I see the amount of water going down. Okay, I'm a striped bass fisherman, trout fisherman, sportsman. The river is disgusting, all the way down to Brooklyn by Governor's Island. My friend has a boatyard there. They've been living there for 70 years. They've never seen the river brown like that. Now, I don't know why this is happening. I've been living up here for 45 years. I've seen plenty of rain. I've never seen this amount of brown water. And you can't blame it on Hurricane Irene. I mean, this is unacceptable to me. I mean, it does have some impact on it, but there's something going on that you people are not letting us know.
I frankly don't buy into the us versus them. Look, I'm from upstate, and I don't doubt it. I've lived in New York City for 20 years, but I just don't buy into the us versus them situation. It's why we supply water both upstate and downstate. But I will address a few things. One, Hudson Brown all the way down. It's true, I passed the Tappan Zee today, that's the case. No one's suggesting that that's from the SOPAS. It's just too small a flow. If you did look at after Hurricane Irene and Lee, and a very wet year, the Mohawk River Valley was hammered. We all know that. Upper Hudson was hammered. The Hudson did not look good. That's definitely true. But there's a lot of, I think that shows the widespread impact of a very wet year. You alluded to, and I know Mike raised earlier, money in New York, the water rates in New York City, which have gone up double digits for 5 of the last 6 years, significantly. They'll go up this year. They've gone up every year. So, we, believe me, when it's rate setting season, as it will be in a few months, we hear from a lot of people in the city about how hard it is to pay. Our water rates happen to be not the cheapest in the country, that's for sure. And we're a public agency, so I don't know what the reference was to profiting, but you know, what it costs is what we charge to build the system. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Steve Noble, and I'm an environmental educator for the City of Kingston. Mayor Shane Gallo was unable to be here this evening, but he asked me to share these remarks on his behalf. They were a little long, so I'm going to trim them back a little bit to make sure to save some time for others this evening. But the historic City of Kingston is greatly influenced and impacted by water. We are surrounded by it, the Hudson River to our east, the Randall Creek to our south, and the Esopus Creek to our north and west. Visitors and residents cannot travel through Kingston without encountering one of these water bodies. The Esopus Creek itself impacts 3.2 miles of shoreline here in our community. Every time we drive from Kingston to the Thruway, Route 209, or to Saugerties on Route 9W, we witness this changing body of water firsthand. It is part of our infrastructure and history here in Kingston. In 2010 and again in 2011, the lower Esopus Creek flowing through Kingston saw sustained high volume and turbidity. High flow conditions is something all riverfront communities must deal with. They are transient, and good community planning can mitigate their impacts. However, sustained turbidity is a new phenomenon we now experience due, in part, by inadequately planning for and now addressing the consequences of focused, ill-considered regulatory dictates. The resulting compromised water quality and water clarity are unpleasant to look at, unsafe to recreate in, and a detriment to tourism here in Ulster County and the City of Kingston. The city, along with every other town along the lower Esopus Creek, is active in the Lower Esopus Watershed Partnership. This partnership made up a series of recommendations to New York City DEC Commissioner Joe Martens on December 15th. Key recommendations were for the New York City DEP to be forced to apply for a speedies permit to regulate discharges from the release channel subject to seeker, and for a commitment to a science-based release strategy, and finally, for independent technical expertise to be provided to the partnership during the speedies interim protocol process. I hope that this evening we are able to take all of these comments, and we know that as we grow our Kingston economy, we cannot have actions of another party impeding our efforts to redevelop areas along our lower Esopus Creek and to attract visitors to our historic community. We need to be proactive. Thank you very much.
Your points are well taken. Commissioner Martens would have liked to be here tonight. We are seriously considering the comments that have been submitted. We also, again, focus on the interim protocol issued only in October 2011 as the starting point for further discussions on how to regulate these releases and to take the steps necessary to restore the water quality of the Esopus. These are important things for us to accomplish at DEC. We envision a partnership to be able to do it, and we encourage the dialogue among the stakeholders to be able to get us there, including DEP, obviously, which serves a very important role in figuring out the future, not only of the water supply, but of the communities in the lower Esopus. And I heard Carter mention some issue of technical assistance that was going forward with the lower Esopus working group. So I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
No, I mean, the offer's been there to the working group, and you know, it's still been there.
Next speaker.
Good evening.
And watch for the signals from up there.
My name is Kelly Myers. I'm the town supervisor for the town of Saugerties. I'm appalled that the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation is not doing their job. The New York City DEP continues to destroy our environmental resources, and DEC has done nothing to stop them. Myself and members of the Ashokan Release Working Group have worked in good faith for a year to try to resolve these issues. And all the while, the DEC and DEP have been engaged in closed-door discussions, writing the interim release protocol that allows DEP to continue releasing nearly 1 billion gallons per day of filthy water into the Esopus Creek. It is ludicrous tonight that both the DEP and DEP leaders here have called us partners. The interim protocol authorizes discharges and procedures that violate state environmental law. The interim protocol has been subject to no environmental review and no public process that would otherwise be required under a permit application and SECRA, as specified in the State Administrative Procedures Act. New York State DEC has failed to enforce the Clean Water Act. The consequences of these excessively turbid releases have been catastrophic and devastating to creek habitat and ecological health. Local businesses have suffered significant economic impacts. Recreation and tourism revenue have declined. Increased flow and creek bank saturation have increased the occurrences of flooding and caused septic system failures and property values to decline. Saugerties is currently in danger of losing our Coast Guard station due to increased siltation in the creek. Our beautiful creek was once classified as a world-class trout stream, and now it's been reduced to a waste channel for New York City's unwanted muck. We are not part of your water system, we're part of your wastewater system. It is morally deplorable. It is morally deplorable that New York City would fail so miserably to provide for its own resources that it would need to commandeer, consume, and destroy the resources of smaller communities without regard for impact, environment, justice, health, compensation, or economic destruction. The DEC has failed to protect our environment. Over the past year, we have exhausted means of reasonable negotiation to no avail. The louder we complain, the less cooperation we get, and attempts to work at partners are shut down. It's crystal clear as of Friday at the last Ashokan Release Working Group meeting that DEP, again, shuts down information and communication when we complain or even make any sort of petitions. It's terrible. How do you propose that we work as authentic, respected partners?
We take our role very seriously, and that is the truth. The Department of Environmental Conservation takes its role as regulators in the state of New York very seriously. We are here to make sure that the Clean Water Act's obligations are met to the extent that we are not successful in negotiating a consent order, as we do in many situations around the state. Then we serve notices of hearing and complaint and make sure that we are taking respondents and holding them responsible for their discharges. We will continue to do that. We continue to take our job very seriously. We continue, under the Commissioner's leadership, to work with our partners to try and solve these problems. And to the extent that you have issues of concern, notwithstanding the reference to the Lower SOPA's working group that you just mentioned, we want to hear them, and we want to work with the communities to get the results that you want. These are not simple issues. They are complex. They require a scientific and technical analysis. I'll wind up in a second. But we will continue to work with you and with DEP to achieve the results that we all want for your community.
I'll just add that many of the issues that she mentioned are the very issues that are the subject of, that will be the subject of the environmental impact statement review and scoping sessions going forward.
Hi, my name is James Smeesit. I am the third vice president of the Ulster County Federated Sportsmen's Clubs, and I am also the trout stocking or wildlife stocking fish chairman for the federation. And I would like to thank Michael Hine for getting this forum together. I would like to say, to start, the Esopus Creek used to be a beautiful watershed. Again, I reiterate now, the lower Esopus is definitely a waste channel. The upper Esopus is just totally barren, more or less, for several miles upstream. The Federation has stocked fish over the years from in the 90s on, and we have took over a wildlife stocking program in 2003, 2004, 2005, and spent approximately $7,500 on that. We also stocked in 2010, had a commitment for a 4-year program. That was the first year. This year we did not stock because of the turbidity in the water. I guess my question is when can we expect Esopus Creek to return to similar conditions it was 5 years ago? When or how much money is being spent on soil conservation upstream and to keep the erosion of the red clay going into the reservoir to prevent the situation at the beginning phase of this? And the other thing is, this is just a statement, but I was in New York City this past week, and unfortunately, I talked to several people about the water supply, and the people of New York City have no idea. That's 8 million people. I have no idea on how many of them know, but the ones that I've talked to have no idea of what their water looks like that they're drinking.
And I've been asked to remind you to keep them answers as short as possible, because there's so many people who have questions.
Okay, well, I'll try. I will say that during Hurricane Irene, Shandaken Tunnel was closed, but still we had turbidity from the upper Esopus, as you point out, and in the reservoir it got to be as high as 2,400 NTUs, which is how we measure it. Today in Ashokan it's 45 in the West Basin, about 24 in the East Basin. So we do see it coming down as we better able to maintain voids, increase retention time. That should decrease. You did mention stream management work, and I'll tell you that that's a big focus of ours. Actually, together with the state, we have been going around county by county, including in Ulster County, to work out more, to do more stream restoration work going forward. I think folks realize how much needs to be done in addition to our acquisition work. To date, we have spent over $11 million, almost $12 million in Ulster County on restoration efforts that will increase and continue.
Good.
Mark,
That's
did
fine.
you want to,
No, we're good.
next question?
Frank Liptek, I'm from Saugerties. I'm not a native, but I've been there 3 or 4 years. I keep my vote on the Esopus. And in the last year or so, with this muddy water, the papers state that the DEC told the DEP not to use alum in the Kensico Reservoir. It's killing marine life, and stop using it. So they don't want to put a filter system in to purify the water. They turn around and the DEC gives the DEP permission to dump 600 million gallons of water, a permit behind closed doors. And this is what you call, I don't know, sweeping under the carpet. I help out in Saugerties Marina, and last year when the docks were pulled, there was at least 2 inches of zebra mussels on the docks. This year when they were pulled out, there's not 1 zebra mussel, because all there is mud.
Do you want to talk about the?
You know, the noise and applause, I know you want to share your feelings, but it adds to the time, and I'll try to be tighter with everybody on time, too.
I can only come back to the interim protocol, which was put in place October 2011, and encourage that the folks in this room and the county, which I believe has previously provided comments, continue to do the analysis that makes this protocol work to the benefit of the community and to the city water supply. It's very important that we have that discussion. There's again, to the extent that you have been through an extensive history with DEP and DEC, we are taking the steps, as Carter mentioned, not only to implement the interim protocol, but to examine it through an environmental review process and to invite the public to participate with us in those efforts. It's extremely important that the public and the government, the City of Kingston, County of Ulster, all participate and work with us on this protocol.
Excuse me. My name is Terry Rosenblum. I live in Woodstock. I was born, brought up, and graduated college in New York City. And This is not how you treat people who come before you to talk about things that bother them. Shame on you. And do not feel that you have to respond to me. The Croton system is the source of some turbidity issues for the city's water. Turbidity problem stems largely from conditions that have been present in the Catskill system from the beginning. Engineering studies in 1903 recognized that the clay of the steeply sloped eastern Catskills turned the clear waters of the Schoharie and Esopus creeks muddy after storms. New York City knew that, and their engineers decided to go ahead anyway, devising a two-reservoir system with built-in turbidity controls. Way back then, it wasn't done right. And you guys keep making it worse, not better. New York City has sought to restrict development throughout its watershed. The City of New York describes this as one of the largest watershed protection programs, along with the land acquisition program, under which the New York City Department of Environmental Protection has purchased through a conservation easement over 70,000 acres since the 1990s. This is our territory that you come into. Climate change in New York City is another problem, and New York City has been addressing it. According to the DEP, it could affect many things, including New York City's water supply, due to the high population and extensive infrastructure in the region. New York is especially at risk if the sea level rises due to many of the bridges connecting to boroughs and entrances to roads and rail tunnels.
Time.
I'm going to keep going.
Well,
High traffic locations such as the airports, the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, the passenger ship terminal are located in areas vulnerable to flooding. The DEC's mitigation for that is, quote, New York has a task force to advise on preparing city infrastructure for water shortages and higher temperatures.
Right, you need to give
I will stop
them
now.
the time. That's for them.
Shame on you.
Well, you know, we're up here to listen, and that's why we certainly have a number of our employees here who live up here to listen as well, and we work very hard every day to that. I don't know that, well, I'll just say that, we try to base our decisions and our policies on the facts and science and how we understand how we can affect the system. I don't know that the rhetoric helps that. I think it detracts from that discussion. Mention was made, I won't address the in-city climate mitigation efforts, which are, I don't know if everybody in the room is interested in that. But, I will say about development in the watershed, our rules say that we only buy from willing sellers. So that's the way we've been operating. We have to make a certain number of offers every year. We do it, and there are folks who want to sell to us.
Mark? All right, next question.
My name is Joanne Powers, Glen Eyrie Boulevard on the Esopus, Saugerties. I grew up, I learned to swim in the Esopus when it was so clear that we used to throw things in the water and dive to get them because we could see the bottom. I watched the river be polluted by runoff from farms. I watched it get dirtier and dirtier. I watched the grasses grow. I watched the efforts to try and cut down the grasses. I watched the chocolate milk flow in. Now, my river is dead, as far as I can see. The egrets won't be back if the river is dead. And by the way, my daughter lives in Queens, and when water leaks, the toilet runs or the water faucet doesn't stop, the landlord does nothing because water doesn't cost very much down there.
You can pass if you want.
I'll pass.
Go ahead.
Good evening, I'm Julian Lennon, I'm from the Ulster, we've already met.
Yep.
Speak into the mic. You know, I'm listening to everybody here this evening, and what I keep in my mind thinking about are certain words: responsibility, transparency, repercussions. I hear about historical things. You know, in Wawarsing, we had a tunnel that you knew was going to leak, and you still built there. The same thing with Roaston. And I'm on the PAC committee, and I've been on that PAC committee since the inception. And I have to tell you that I've never heard, all this time, meeting after meeting, anything about DEP having information that in 1958 you knew about this leak in Wawarsing and Roaston, and there was grouting that went on in Roaston. And it just appalls me that you're going to expect Wawarsing to wait another 10, 12, 15 years when this plan should have been going on a long, long time ago. We have sustained so much damage, so much loss financially, personally, the stress, living with the mold, living with all of that. And yet, you've known since 1958, not since the late 80s. And I have the documentation to say so, and I just can't believe that meeting after meeting that I've never been told that. Transparency, respect. That's what we really want, and a solution, not 12 years in the making.
I've been to Julianne's house, and I, have seen the very real, issues she has in her basement. So we are, we, the city, are in discussions with her about making her whole, and I hope to do that sooner than later. I can't speak for folks in 1958. I really can't. What I do know is that, we have, just in the last few years, and that's what I went back to saying, that I do think that we have turned a corner, certainly in terms of our receptivity. We have bitten a very large bullet in terms of putting in place our biggest capital program in the next 10 years, which is $2 billion to fix that leak. So it does take a while. I wish it wasn't the case. But the commitment is there. We've hired folks. We are, breaking ground as soon as we can on that project.
Joe Leone from the Federated Sportsmen's Club of Ulster County. I want to thank Mike Hine for assembling this tonight, and also for the DEP for being here. We're also a part of the Shokan release group, and I want to thank John Vickers from the DEP for keeping it going. He's got a pretty hard job. He's got a lot of stakeholders yelling at him in a room, and then he has to go back to the DEP and sell our ideas. I want to also mention one other thing that Jimmy left out on the fish stocking of 2010. We put that right in right before the reservoir was opened up, and all the walleyes were washed out to the river. We did put a claim into the New York City controller, and as of tonight, I believe the treasurer says we still haven't got that check in the mail yet, right? So we'll continue to claim for the fish that were lost, along with the other property owners. There is an assessment going on, environmental assessment. We need to move that along. The sports clubs and the other organizations were the plaintiffs against the DEP and successfully sued the DEP and won the case. And the only thing that's changed from the case on the tunnel, the Shandaken Tunnel, is now the lower Esopus looks the same as the upper Esopus. So we need to bring the creek back to what it looked like 5 to 10 years ago. We need to get the sportsman so that it is back to a top 5 trout stream as it once was, to bring tourism back into the area. It brings tax money back into the area, and it lowers our property taxes. And the city has to divert the money, this $300 million scheme of buying land to protect the reservoir and control the areas where the clay and the silt is coming into the creek and the streams. It's been identified by the sportsmen for the last 20 years. That's where the $300 million need to be put, not buying more land.
I think you raised some very interesting and I think very useful ideas. And there were a number of county resolutions that folks don't remember throughout October, November, December, I guess, to talk about that very issue, which was shifting funding from acquisitions to stream restoration. And we're certainly open to the idea. Obviously, that has to be worked out with a number of people, including the state and EPA. But we're certainly open to the idea, and we've been meeting with folks pretty regularly to pursue that.
Next speaker. And those of you with notes that you're looking at, just keep an eye on the cards.
Good evening, my name is Laura Smith and I'm a resident who's been flared out by the leaking aqueduct ever since I bought my home in 2003. I'd like to thank Mike Hine for opening up this venue so that we can all get together to somehow come up with a solution to all the problems that we have here in this room. Gross negligence on the part of the DEP by mismanaging their system, both systems, the Catskill and the Delaware Aqueduct, has put a tremendous burden on the residents of Ulster County. The only word that comes to mind when I try to describe this to people when they ask what's going on your property as they walk around the sinkholes and the ground is uneven is that this leaking aqueduct is fracking or warsing. There's no other way to describe it because this water under pressure is taking everything in its path underground. You see it in the Esopus with chocolate water. We see it when it comes up through the basement floors. We see it when it erodes the property around in our community. We see it when another sinkhole pops up. And unfortunately, one of my neighbors, who's elderly and disabled, fell into one of these sinkholes. I mean, this is unacceptable. I wish we'd have had more people, as if we needed more people here this evening. But majority of the people that live in our area are retired, working people that were born and raised here in New York State. I, for myself, I'm a Brooklyn transplant. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I spent every summer coming up to the Catskills, stayed in the bungalow colony in Greenfield Park. I loved it. I chose to buy a house here. I had no idea because it was covered up. There was no information out there that the public had that this aqueduct was leaking and doing this damage. I see the red sign, and you see the sign? This was my sign when I came in, and I was told to sit down. It says reserved. I do not want this to be my epitaph, that Laura Smith died on 42 Smith Road because of mold inhalation, because of stress-related illnesses, and because of the DEP's problem. Thank you very much for your time.
What I can point to, again, I've been to Mrs. Smith's house as well. Oops, I don't know if that was you or me. But look, I've seen your house, and what I can say is I think we all want the buyout program with Senator Bonchek and the state help put together. We've matched. The county's administering. That should happen as soon as possible. We don't want it to delay.
Can I just add one thing, and I'll make it quick? Matching the funds is one thing, but 10 years of waiting for this repair to occur is going to be another 10 years of stress on the land below us, on the homeowners, on our financial situation, on our emotional situation. I think you need a better solution than to wait for that and put a little bit more money on the table. And take care of the people.
Sure. I mean, what I'll say is right now there's $7.4 million, and there's a number of criteria that the county is going through. We don't know if it's enough or not. I mean, so let's see what happens. Let's push this process through now.
Mark,
It is in writing. We have an agreement that we're about to finalize with the county.
Mark, do you have anything to add? Okay, next question.
Hello, I'm Mike Harkavy from. Okay, I'm Mike Harkavy from Saugerties. First of all, I want to thank Mike Hine for getting this whole shindig together tonight. They've been talking about this being a fight between David and Goliath. It seems like an even battle to me right now. Ulster County is here. You know, I know that New York City and Ulster County have similar feelings about fracking and have found ways to come together on it. I'm confident that we'll find a way to come together on these problems. One question, I noticed from the slide of the two basins of the reservoir that one is turbid and one isn't. Why, if we need to make these releases, doesn't the lower Esopus simply get the clean water rather than the turbid water?
Sure, let me address that. Are you done? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Simple and plain.
Sure. Right now, the difference is, if you released it, right now you wouldn't see much of a difference. But there really are three options that we have. One is to operate the release channel as we are. The other is to stop it, do barely, bare minimum flows in it. What will happen then is that the West Basin will fill up and spill over the weir, and everything will mix, and it will be the same. So it's really only a matter of time, and I'm talking days. And the other is to, stop everything, and it'll just go through the spill. So, unfortunately, it's one of these situations where there aren't a lot of great options. We do think that the interim protocol does set some parameters whereby, there's high readings down in the downstream gauge, we'll stop releases of the waste channel. Otherwise, we think it's the best balance for maintaining those voids so that we can prevent downstream flooding. I get back to Hurricane Irene, and what our data shows is that we clipped a very substantial peak off that the flows that were coming into the reservoir. Only 15% went out.
Well, since I didn't use my full time,
She's the boss.
I mean, if we're all in agreement that we're getting these heavy storms, and this is the new norm, that's not a very efficient answer. I mean, what is going to be done to ensure that the lower Esopus is clean?
Again, I'll say that, the protocol we have it's an interim basis. We know we can, over time, we'll learn more, we'll be able to do better. As we learn more about how weather patterns are affecting storage, maybe we can store less, and that's what we're tinkering with right now.
Okay. Part of the environmental review process is to look at alternatives. Part of the environmental review process is to look at the alternatives, to evaluate the technical aspects of the various releases. And so that's, again, that's the approach we are taking. It will involve you. I can't repeat that enough, that the public is invited and welcome and encouraged to participate in the environmental review, which will evaluate the alternatives, the impacts from the alternatives, and the various costs and benefits of each. So that will be happening this spring, and we will work with County Executive Hine to make sure that the county is brought into the process and made a partner in the process.
Could I just ask how many questions remain? Can any? Wow. Do you want me to shorten this to a minute? I mean, or just the people at the end lose, because we can't go forever. I know you're getting restless. All right, so continue as is, right? All right, two minutes. Bloomberg will be back, right? Yeah. Okay.
Hello, I'm Rosemary Sullivan, town of Ulster. We live on the lower Esopus, Glenary Lake Park, which used to be a beautiful lake and like a mini resort type of area. Several Town of Ulster meetings ago, we were encouraged to submit claims for damage, and everyone else was as well. Mr. Mark Kitchener in New York has been handling our claim. However, after several letters to him, there has been absolutely no response. We'd like something in writing. what is the situation with our claim at this time? And what do we have to do to get recognized in writing, not just talking to someone on the telephone?
You know, I do know that we handed out some claims forms.
Lots of them.
Right, lots of them. The state, the city, along with the state and every, probably the county as well, has a process where you have to file a claims form and then, it goes forward. So that's with our comptroller's office. I'll find out if you leave your name with me. I'll find out what happened to your claim.
Right. Thank you.
But maybe you could leave it with one of the county folks here, and they'll get it to me.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mark, any comment? No. Oh, nobody up? Hurry, hurry. And feel free to shorten your questions, just, out of kindness to the other people.
Good evening. I'm John Morrow. I'm a councilman with the town of Ulster, and I'm also a resident of the creek in the town of Ulster, Lake Katrine. I have about a quarter of a mile of creek frontage, and have watched the creek change dramatically over the last 5 years, which I think everybody's kind of aware of. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and getting beat up here. I think we've all kind of said the same thing, including the diocese, that we're all on the same page and that we want to solve a problem. We've identified a problem, we want to solve it. We've got some of the brightest people in the country sitting here that are experts on this problem, and I think what we need now is action. Identifying the problem is great, but we need action to fix the problem. Where are we going to go from here? I know I submitted a minor claim of like $1,500 to the comptroller, got a letter back and said you submitted it too late, which doesn't really help me very much. And I sit on the ARWG committee and Loop. I'm a member of the Loop committee, so I've been involved in this for the last year and a half since it started. But I'd like to see, recreation come back and fishing come back. Some of the things we've noticed on the creek where I am is nobody's out boating, canoeing, kayaking like they used to, water skiing, jet skiing, and so forth and so on. It just sort of died. And I invite you to come down and see what it really looks like, from our standpoint. But anyway, thank you.
Okay.
They're ready. Mark?
No, good.
Ready for another question? Come on, guys, get up.
Hi, my name's Andrew Anderson. I own Country Flowers. My first business from Roundout Reservoir. Since 1993, my property's been flooded out 10 times. I have $200,000 in damage. I went to FEMA. FEMA told me they couldn't help me. I went to the small business. They said they couldn't help me. I have to go to Farmers Administration. I've been to Farmers Administration, and they told me I'm greenhouses, they can't help me. I went to the Catskill Watershed. I asked for a grant, I asked for a loan, I asked for help. No one contacted me back. I went and read into the record that the watershed gave $1 million out in grants and loans. I called the gentleman up. He told me, Mr. Myers, that New York City is not in response for flooding. You have the Roundup has 3 reservoirs that come into it. I don't understand how New York City doesn't have responsibility for flooding. My property is in a 500-year floodplain, which means 0.2% chance in 500 years I'll be flooded. Please explain to me how in 10 years, since 1993, I've been flooded out 10 years, and how New York City is not responsible for that. Now you're going to be shutting down the tunnel. Where's all that water going to be going? It's going to be going down the ground now. There's going to be more flooding. You guys go home with paychecks. I'm wiped out. Okay? My life insurance is gone. My retirement is gone. Everybody still wants to get taxes. And you go home with paychecks every Friday. I don't have any vacation time, no sick time. I have a business. And no one is helping me. I don't know what to do.
I don't know, again, I don't know the particulars of your case. I'm very sympathetic. It sounds like you have some real problems with flooding. But, I don't have a response here now.
I appreciate that.
But if you could, again, leave your information and we'll with the folks.
That's what it is. Mr. Myers laughed at me and says, I'm sorry, I'm punch-struck because of all the flooding, Catskill watershed. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, we can follow up with him. Obviously, Catskill Watershed Corporation is
It's a
independent,
separate
but
thing, but New York City helps the Catskill watershed.
yeah,
correct?
certainly we fund it.
Okay? He
Yeah.
says they have nothing to do with it.
Okay.
Late last year, the governor and legislature enacted basically a program to help those who have been impacted by the flooding from Irene and Lee. And those guidelines should be announced shortly. They have not been announced as of yet. I strongly urge that you look into that program to see whether there's an opportunity. Well, I'm suggesting to you that there's another program that will be announced shortly that will provide funding for small businesses that have been impacted by Hurricanes Irene and Lee. And hopefully there will be some opportunity for you to work with representatives at the at the ESDC to process a claim that will help you out.
$200,000 of damage. No one's called me. The environmental impact. No one's called me. I'm the first business off the roundup. And no one's called me. What kind of environmental impact studies do you do?
You made a point.
How you doing? My name's Michael Paul from Hurley, Catskill Gourmets at Paul's Farm. Our family owns a significant amount of the creek frontage. I think most of the damage that I heard was a result of a hurricane, not from the DEP magically conjuring mud. It was a storm, my pumpkins got washed away. If the reservoir had been empty, there probably would have been more buffer room, and that would have been cool. So I'm asking you for 77% capacity at any given time, unless you're in a long-term drying trend. I don't want to see it ever fuller than 77%. Because you even said that you have more than enough water elsewhere, sooner than later. Second of all, I'd like to know why there's such a culture of retrenchment at the reservoir. All your infrastructure is crumbling, yet you're building a multi-billion-dollar UV treatment plant. You have all these capital projects going on right now that should have been started 25, 30 years ago, but you wait until something goes wrong. When Chernobyl melted down in the Soviet Union, they sacrificed hundreds of men to stop the problem, yet you won't go in the streams and stop the mud from flowing. I've lost, I don't know how many dollars in terms of canoe and kayak rentals, but the gentleman sitting next to you won't let you go fix the streams. And I think a lot of people here want to know why.
Let me just say one thing.
And I don't think a big 3-year study is going to solve the problem. It's go in, stack the rocks, put the fabric in place, put the pins in place. Let's get on with it. We're tired of waiting. You got the money. You got the money.
Well, Michael, what I will say is that we are doing those very real restoration projects right now, and we are certainly working with all the counties west of Hudson, Greene, Delaware, a little bit further along, especially to do those very real restoration projects. To your point about how we spend our money, I will say that we have been a little bit frustrated over the last 10 years. About 69% of our capital budget, which has been a lot of money, has gone towards unfunded mandates, federal and state unfunded mandates. UV treatment, you mentioned, is one of them. Catskill filtration is another. We do know that going forward, for now, knock on wood somewhere, that era, we're wrapping those big projects up, and going forward, unfunded mandates are about 27% of our capital budget. So we are, as fast as we can, turning to repair of our infrastructure. But I don't know that issue, I think that's a somewhat separate issue from what you're talking about. I think you would be most affected by and interested in the money we're spending on stream restoration projects, and we are very, moving it forward as fast as we can.
Everyone here is about stream restoration, with the exception of the people of Warsing. I understand their problems. Everyone here is sick of the mud.
Next question, though. We have to move on.
Yeah, let me just respond that the state has, in post-Irene and post-Lee storm conditions, has sent out our staff to hundreds and hundreds of sites throughout Ulster County and the rest of the state in order to work with communities on stream restoration projects. These are very important to us. There's an ongoing process in each of the counties we are going out with representatives of FEMA, representatives of the Natural Resource Conservation Service, representatives of the Soil and Water Conservation Districts to identify priority sites for stream restoration. And we intend to work with our partners in that effort as well. There are a lot of projects that can be done. Many of the projects require planning so that the work upstream doesn't have worse impacts on residents and businesses and infrastructure downstream. So this is an ongoing process that's extremely important to DEC, and we will continue to work with our partners to be able to find funds, and we've been successful at bringing in federal dollars to help this effort, to do these stream restoration, stream management projects to help alleviate some of the problems that you've been talking about all night.
I'm Lance Madison, president of the Ulster County Development Corporation, and I have some quick yes or no questions. I think they're fair yes or no questions. The first is for DEC. Do you agree it would be fair to hold the DEP to the same environmental standards that apply to everyone else in New York? Yes or no?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to answer a question yes or no. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We have the responsibility to hold all regulated entities to the environmental standards that are promulgated through the environmental conservation law.
I think that's a yes. Second, also for DEC, are you saying that one acceptable option is simply to continue with the status quo?
Well, again, I thank you again for the opportunity for a yes or no question. We have entered into this process with DEP and with the other partners to develop an interim protocol that is designed to begin to address the issues that have been raised tonight. We'll continue to work on those issues. We'll continue to develop the protocol so that it's protective of both the community, the host communities here in Ulster County, and also the city's water supply. So to the extent that that's a yes answer, I guess my answer is yes.
I hope it's a yes. And in the same vein, is it possible, are you suggesting that there may simply be no fundamentally different technical/managerial process or solution that goes beyond the present basic structure?
No, I'm suggesting that the protocol that we developed was an interim protocol, and that we are going to get our best scientists and engineers together to examine how we can improve it. So the answer is no, we're not satisfied with the status quo. We are looking to evaluate alternatives, and that evaluation will be done in a public process.
Thank you. And for DEP, first yes or no question, do you have a solution for the commercial property owners along Route 28 who are now told that they're no longer able to develop their business properties for business purposes? And can that solution include jobs as opposed to just shutting down forever?
Yes, I think, you're assuming that we're stopping development there. It's not the case. Look at that whole corridor. And in fact, we've had discussions with Phoenicia about giving them $17 million to build a wastewater treatment plant. But we're perfectly, I give you a yes or no first, then I'm explaining,
I think
okay?
I didn't explain my question well. I'm referring to the Route 28 commercial property owners whose ability to operate as a business has lapsed. They were grandfathered and it's lapsed, and now they're no longer able to. Do you have a solution for them?
I think the grandfathering continues. I don't know that your premise is correct. I dispute your premise.
I'd love to have a further detailed discussion about that. Let me go to the third quick question.
This is the end.
Okay. Will you make a personal commitment to urge Mayor Bloomberg to accept County Executive Hines' invitation to come to Ulster County and see for himself the problem and work on substantive solutions?
The mayor is certainly aware of the offer and makes his own decisions. I don't tell the mayor what to do.
Sounded troublingly like a no.
Next question.
Hello, I'm Michael Raphael from Project Hope, which is a FEMA project in Ulster and Delaware County. And actually I want to talk about the things that don't cost money. Maybe this will be more interesting to the DEP and the DEC. I'm talking about the emotional damage that's been constant going on and you hear the residents here who are coming out and saying, We're angry, we're frustrated, we're traumatized. We've been doing this for a long time. What do you say to the people whose community has already been hard hit by the economic factors hitting everybody these days, but also being constantly under the pressure of not knowing when the next flood is going to happen in their home, when the next basement is going to be flooded? These are damages to communities that are long-lasting, and like I said, we're interested in Ulster County continuing with population in it, not without population, not only to serve the watershed of New York, but also to have viable living communities. What do you say to those people?
Well, you know, those are certainly very real, you know, feelings, and I know it's pretty widespread. I mean, I talked to a lot of people in New Paltz who have the same feelings, and I think probably the county and the whole region will have to deal with it increasingly because of, you know, if there's, as we expect, more and more severe rains from climate change. I do know that, you know, people who live along the Wallkill, who get hammered all the time from floods, have the same feeling. So I think it's not unique to New York City in our infrastructure in our areas. It's a very real issue. Certainly, you know, knowing that there's some path forward, I think is helpful, but you're the expert in that field.
Hi, my name is Ron Leonard. I'm a volunteer for the Ashokan chapter of Triton Limited and a co-founder of Catskill Delaware Natural Water Alliance. I sort of wanted to say a little bit about some of the shoulders that we're standing on with people that came before us that have been working on this issue. Bruce Duffy, Sue Rinsell, Ralph Hoffman, Chuck Schwartz, some of the people that have given you, New York City, probably many millions of dollars worth of their time. And if all of us together have given you $1 million, I can assure you Bruce Duffy gave probably about $10 million of his time. Those people that I just mentioned are no longer with us to continue this fight. And I'm hoping that you can join with us and make something of their effort and make this a thing for the community to be proud of. I remember the work that we did on UV, negotiating with New York City years ago with the help of Ira Stern. Thank you, Ira. It proves that with community cooperation we can make something work. I think that over 15 years ago we sponsored a guy called Dave Rosgen, who is really the guy who wrote the book on stream restoration. I really think that there is a science that we can use to solve this problem. You know, if you've invested $11 million in stream restoration, I think that's woefully inadequate. Obviously, we're dealing with a problem that is unprecedented. The storm Irene is a 0.2% storm. It never should have happened, but this is the new reality. I think that we can do something better. I think we can do something smarter. I think we can create a public-private partnership, like the governor just mentioned, with the $2 billion that they want to invest in the energy highway upstate. I think we can invest a little bit in seeing that New York City can get water and we can survive as a community. I think that there is a way to do this to preserve not only people's lives, but their property, their livelihood, and basically our farming community. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I invite you to roll up your sleeves and work with us in the community, to work with us in TU. We're going to be sponsoring a series of meetings to deal with the nuts and bolts issue, and I think that if you cooperate with us, we can more than cooperate with you and give you good value for this.
Thank you, and we very much want to. You know, I'll make a quick point, which is that I think what you're saying is that stream restoration can be done right and done wrong, and we certainly are very willing to put resources into making sure it gets done right. And I want to say, you know, the real experts here, kind of in that second row here, are DEP staff. You mentioned Ira, but there's also Dave Warren, Bryce Swarthout, John Vickers, and Tina Johnston, who really are the nuts and bolts, along with Paul Rush, who can't be here tonight, of our upstate operation. And they're working day and night to do the kind of restoration work that you're talking about, which we very much welcome the offer, and we'll take you up on it.
I just wanted to mention, we're the ones that actually instituted the lawsuit against New York City years ago in the Shandaken Tunnel. That was a lawsuit that never should have happened. It was really done because New York City was not responsive. I hope you can take a lesson from that. We won that battle. We're willing to win the battles going forward.
Brian Schoonmaker doesn't seem to be around, but so I'm quoting from an interview with him after the last storm. He said there could have been more done. He owns a farm, the Schoonmaker's farm, for more than 300 years, which was under as much as 5 feet of water from overflows of the creek, which is fed by the New York City-owned Rondout Reservoir. He said there could have been more done to bring the reservoir level down sooner when reports of Irene's path showed the storm heading toward the Hudson Valley and Catskills. I think the storm dumped a lot more water to the area west of us and was more than they had expected, he said. We only received 9 or 10 inches of rain, and that wasn't enough to reflect the amount of damage that we received. We've had that amount of rainfall before, and obviously the creeks would rise, but not to the extent they did this time. Schoonmaker said the rising creek level, about 7 hours after the rain stopped falling last Sunday, reflected excess waters coming from the reservoir instead of local streams. It was the duration, too, where it came up so fast that it's obvious they couldn't control it. Once the water goes over top of the reservoir, they can't control it, I understand that. But with that amount of capacity, why can't they let the water level down to accept additional water to the unit? That's what it's supposed to be, and that's what it was constructed for. I have a letter here, which obviously I don't have time for, from Dr. Martin Lukowitz, who has had to close Accord, who has had to move from Accord Chiropractic in Accord because for the second time in 6 years he was completely flooded. And another from the Accord Wines and Spirits, who had the river rise 23 feet and then 2 feet more into the store. And all feel that this is due to the way that the water is not being released ahead of time by the reservoir. And what we're wondering is, not wanting to create this dichotomy, us against them, how can we find the voice in the reservoir system that will respond to us when there's going to be a storm and lower that water level ahead of time? In my house, the water was 1 inch under my living room floor and 1 inch all around me that high, racing. As it gets warmer, there's going to be more water in the air coming down faster.
Thank you.
And then what happens? Thanks. So my question is about how do we do this?
What, I think you've got a very good vehicle going forward, which is, again, you may not be a member, but there is a working group, but you know, it's one reason why we're opening this up to the whole public, is to make sure that there's a public comment period, as there is now. It's in your comments, you know, to DEC. And there will be on the environmental impacts going forward. The last thing I want, you raised the point about 9-10 inches of rain. Sometimes it causes problems, sometimes it doesn't. Just point to the complexity of the issue, which is that it's really rainfall intensity that matters almost as much as total rainfall. We know that.
My name is Marcy Goulart. I'm representing the Holiday Inn in Kingston, 212 hotel that has been in existence for over 40 years and also employs over 100 employees every year. We have experienced in the last 3 years the need to shut down half of our hotel because of it being inundated with water and our transformers being shut down. And then after that happens, we have to wait 2 or 3 weeks for Central Hudson to turn us back on, have our electricians, and that causes great hardship to our employees and to the people who expect to come to Hudson Valley and enjoy tourism. And so that's what I want to say in relationship to my hotel and to tourism. You are affecting our only real business that we have in Ulster County. Now, as a private citizen, I live in the town of Saugerties. I live by the boat basin, and I see every day what happens with the chocolate water. We also just have Diamond Mills opening up. A man has put a lot of money into investing in our county, and his public will be enjoying chocolate water for the summer. At our beach, 2 years ago, I saw fish floating on the water, and I personally decided if the fish couldn't swim in the water, neither should I. So it's real. You can do all the impact statements you want. If a fish can't live, neither can we. Thank you.
Next. next questioner up, so we, yeah.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ray Tonkashila Vaughn. I'm a member of the Seneca tribe of the Iroquois Confederacy and the Oglala Lakota tribe in Pine Ridge. We have a saying that Mother Earth will sustain us as long as we respect and sustain her. It seems to me ironic that we have to fight in order to have pure, unpolluted water, unpolluted air, unpolluted soil in which to grow our food. And water is basically life, as we all know, not only for man, but for trees, people, animals, fish, and all life. Without water, there is no life. So it is up to us, in the Lakota language, we say, Mitakawe Yasi, we're all related. Whether we're red, white, black, or yellow, our blood runs the same. We have one Father, the Creator, one Mother, Mother Earth, and as a united people, there's nothing we cannot achieve when it's for something positive. So we're all united here, we know what we want to achieve, and a healthy environment means a healthy people. We don't want to think of the alternative. Most of the sickness is environmentally connected, and we have a job to do to keep our environment healthy and to keep ourselves healthy. And as I said before, a healthy environment means a healthy people. So I thank all the people who have enabled us to come together to speak more or less with one voice, which is something that we're all concerned about, the life force called water. Palamaya, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Come on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Michael, thanks for the opportunity to allow us to come here and share ideas and perhaps even vent. I'm Jay Martin. I live in Accord, not too far from the banks of the Rondout Creek, and I see it's flooding regularly. After what I've seen and heard this evening, Mr. Strickland, I'm sad to say that your department's name is almost a bad joke. Department of Environmental what? Protection? From what I've seen in the Lower East Sopus for the past year and a half, it's been a disgrace. It's been a crime that you have knowingly, willingly, and willfully degraded the quality of our water there. And for Mr. Gertzman, perhaps your agency should change its name to the Department of Environmental Correction, because we have some serious problems here that must be addressed. I'm a charter boatman on the Hudson River during the spring striper season. It remains to be seen this year what effect this Sopus Creek is going to have on the herring run and the stripers as they go up there for their spawning rituals. As a boatman, if I were to drop 2 or 3 drops of gasoline or oil in the water and a sheen were spotted by a DEC officer, for that single event, I could be fined up to $500,000. Not an ongoing event. I have polluted that water, checked the regulations, see what the Coast Guard says. I could be fined up to $500,000. We're talking here about $11 million for stream restoration. As Jim said, that's $1 and change per New York City person for this attempt. We've heard a lot about protocols, we've heard a lot about studies. All of these things, unfortunately, take time. These people don't have time with mold in their basement. It's insidious, it's a killer. I hope that you are not only listening tonight, but you soon will be doing. These people want to see things move forward. They're tired of treading water.
That's
John?
fine.
Try to be ready, because they're talked out.
I think we've answered.
My name is
most of
Alfred
the
Higley.
questions.
I'm a councilman in town of Shandaken.
Okay.
And I just want to ask you guys why
New York City continues to buy up land in the town of Shandaken off back roads and drives up the rest of our taxes in Shandaken. They're not paying the same tax percentage share as the rest of the people in Shandaken, and I'd like to know why. Their property is just as valuable as anybody else's. And one other question I have about the dredging of the upper Esopus. I was in the Schoharie Valley, and I see that they're working up there like mad, building walls in the streams, but they're not doing it in Shandaken. There's nobody working in the stream. We need dredging in Shandaken. We need it bad. If we don't have it, we're going to have another flood, and we're going to be in the same position we're in now. So I just want you to all understand that we need dredging in Shandaken bad.
I'll address taxes, you can do it. So.
Yeah, I won't talk about taxes.
Okay.
Just to your point, there are stream management plans throughout the New York City watershed that have been put together by soil and water conservation districts to address the issues of flooding and to address the issues of property protection. Those are done based upon, by experts, based upon the science of stream morphology, the structures of streams. It's extremely important that work not be done in streams that's not done under the guidance of these experts, because the problem can often result, fixing the problem in one location can often result in exacerbating the problem in downstream communities. We do not want that to happen. On the other hand, there is a significant amount of resources available to do these stream management plans in all of the communities. The table is set to get this work done. There will be funding announced in short order to help communities through the county soil and water conservation districts to get this work done. And I urge the town of Shandaken, like every other community in Ulster County, to access the resources to be able to get this work done.
You know, Mark can't speak to the taxes. I can speak to the taxes. You probably know, but everybody else doesn't. We do own some 2,600 acres in Shandaken. Pay about $1 million in taxes on that land. And just a few years ago, the city and the town of Shandaken did settle our liability. So that process has been resolved to mutual satisfaction, as far as I know. And going forward, there is a valuation template we're working on to systematize taxes. Comment was made, I think, in the introduction about the taxes and people going bankrupt, et cetera. We do, under 1997 agreement that set forth the whole watershed plan, we do pay towns. We have a fund that pays for towns to avail themselves of tax council. So, we're certainly not aware of anybody going to bankruptcy, and that, I think, has been funded pretty well. So, we have very few disputes going forward, and we're working on a process for templates that will systematize our tax payments.
Greg Lynn from Moreno Street in Kingston. I had a question. I may be mistaken on this, but is there some filtration plant that the DEC keeps granting a 10-year waiver that doesn't need to be built?
It's actually EPA and Department of Health. State Department of Health.
Where would that filtration plant be?
It would be downstate somewhere, Westchester, Bronx.
Would it enable any lessen this release of water? Would it be able to do that?
We'd still have to treat the water to be a low, and nothing can handle, 2,400 NTUs of turbidity. So there still have to be a process for keeping it lower.
The times and the amount of water that you have to release this water.
It's possible, yeah.
Would it give you the opportunity to create a little bit larger void in the reservoir?
I don't know about the void.
If it would you be willing to build it?
I think it's better to have the current system we have now, which is, I think resulted in pretty substantial investment upstate. You have to remember that we wouldn't be spending the kind of money we're spending on extending sewers and building wastewater treatment plants upstate if we could just filter it downstate. So it's been to mutual benefit.
Wanting the waiver for the filtration?
We think it's better for everybody.
Have you looked into it? You're the DEP, have you studied this? Have you seen what this filtration plant may be capable of doing or enabling?
Well, the agency that has primacy over the filtration avoidance determination, as you've referenced it, is the New York State Department of Health. We are very involved in the process of working with the State Department of Health and also the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, which has the decision-making on this issue, as to implementation of the various measures that need to be taken to avoid this filtration requirement. So yes, we're aware of it. We are working with our partners in the city and other state agencies and the federal government to make sure the FAD, as it's called, is implemented in a way that's equitable to upstate communities and achieves safe drinking water for downstate communities. That's our goal, and that's what we continue to try to achieve. Now, again, the interim protocol that we've talked about starts to take the existing situation and provide some measure of relief. Somebody mentioned that we ought to maintain the void at, I forget what it was, 77%. We're looking at those issues in order to ensure that there's adequate water supply, that there's adequate releases to the lower Esopus, and that there's adequate flood mitigation. So these are all issues that DEC with DEP and others will be looking at. And it's very important for us to take that step so that the relief can be seen, measurably seen, in the downstream communities.
But isn't not the releases for this, is that not their way of filtering their water? Or one means of them filtering their water? Is that why they release the water?
Well, it's a complicated system of how releases get discharged into the reservoir system. I'm sorry, the purposes of the releases?
Of the water. Is that not one of the purposes?
Well, one of the issues is the volume of water and how to treat it, how to provide the most clear water that is possible to the New York City drinking water system.
Release is one purpose, is to...
I'd say the releases serve multiple purposes, yes, and including that, yes. Well, no, I'm answering, I'm having a dialogue. These are not simple questions, and we're trying to provide... No, I think we're trying to provide a context in which we can answer questions.
Because what I want to know is, if you create a bigger void, it means you have to release water to do that. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
In order to make room in the cup, you have to let water out.
Right.
Okay. So then you have to find a happy medium here of releasing this water, creating the void.
Correct.
And supplying clean water. Is this going to be something that's possible?
We're hoping that it's possible. We're working towards it. That's exactly.
Based on everybody else's, you've had an awful long time.
Yeah. Whether we've had an awful long time or not, and I do appreciate the frustration and the sentiment that's being expressed here. And the reason I'm here is to listen to you and to listen to the community, understanding the full scope and depth of your concerns. That's why I'm here. And it's extremely important to my department to take into account all of the issues that have been raised here and to try to find ways that we can solve those problems. Are we perfect at trying to solve problems? Absolutely not. Are we making the effort and the commitment of our staff resources, our technical resources, our scientific understanding of what's happening in the reservoir system? Yes, that's what we're doing because it's extremely important to us. Again, as I've said, not only to provide conservation releases and flood mitigation, but also to protect the drinking water supply of 9 million New Yorkers. These are all extremely important issues. We're taking them seriously, and we're hoping to find the solutions. The interim protocol, I have it here, we want to provide the opportunity for comments, is one step towards that goal. We are not just giving up with the interim protocol.
We have to move on. It's not fair.
This was issued October 11th, sir? This was issued in October 2011.
My name is Bob Calb. I come from Shandaken. I'm not on the lower Esopus, all these people are, but we have our problems. A lot of their problems can be resolved in my neighborhood. And they're not the turbidity coming down from Birch Creek and whatnot. They're the turbidity that you're putting into the stream through that portal coming from the Gilboa Dam every day. I come down here tonight, the stream was perfectly clear till I got to Alabama. And then you can see the stream running clear on one side and mud on the other. The only way you're going to resolve this problem, shut it off where it starts. Close that portal now. Thank you.
Next question.
My name's Al Higley, and when I'm not here, this thing's not about me. It's about these poor people out in Warsing, the upper, and I'm from the upper end of the Esopus. I'm from Mount Tremper. I've been a fisherman in this stream here for the last 55 years. And I've never seen conditions the way they are. And I think it can be resolved if the City of New York and the DEC and the DEP, right, get together and say, how are we going to solve this problem? We're here tonight, I know what you're trying to say, but we've been to these meetings before. We've been listening to these meetings for the last 50 years. It's time now, we really got a real problem. People out of their homes, people losing everything, they lost all their property values. Where the hell are we going, right? I heard this gentleman talking about $7.5 million. That's a piss in the Esopus, it's nothing, right? It's nothing. We need, the $7.5 million wouldn't even handle Phoenicia, right? We have got to move here in a positive direction, and they tell you the answer is dredging, right? And not only the Esopus Creek, you got to think about dredging the Ashokan reservoirs, the Papacton, and the rest of them, because when you look at the upper basin below the chimney hole, you're looking at 10 to 15 foot of mud, pure mud, right? And you compute those into gallons of water. You're talking more and more water that should be in the reservoir. So I'll let you guys go.
We've looked at, dredging and will continue to do so of reservoirs. It actually creates very little volume. I know that might be hard for you to believe, but it does. With regard to dredging in the creeks, that's a very, stream restoration, I won't use dredging, can be done right and can be done wrong. And when it's done wrong, it really hurts downstream folks too. So the last thing you want to do is create situations, as has been the case over the last 50 years in other parts of the country, where, they straighten and channelize a river, and then the downstream residents have to do it, and then, it goes on, and you end up with something like the LA River.
I know what you're saying. I don't agree.
My name is Susan Bolitzer, and I'm with the Esopus Creek Conservancy. We have 168-acre preserve that the Esopus wraps around in Saugerties. We've got a lot of hills, but we're mainly floodplain, and we have a federal wetland. So our concern with the Conservancy and with our organization is mainly with wildlife that I'll address, so I won't go any further with that right now. Also, hikers who come to enjoy the scenic views of the Esopus Beach, which are not there now, kayakers who this past summer just didn't even bother. But as my own personal comments, not as a spokesman for the preserve, is that I also own a home in Brooklyn. I go down there a lot. I've been going down there more in the last few years. Brooklyn used to be a borough of 6-story buildings where people rented and lived, and except for downtown Brooklyn. Now if you go into Brooklyn, it's high-rise after high-rise after high-rise. They're all going up in that borough. And every time I see another one going up, I'm thinking, wow, what needs to be needed. There's a stadium going up. A lot of beer going to be drunk in that stadium. A lot of toilet flushes. So where is that coming from? Is anybody? We know where it's coming from. Is anybody thinking about these things? I'd just like to finish. I was driving down the East River Drive, and I heard Mike Bloomberg, and I really wish he was here. I thank Mike so much for having this tonight, but I really wish Mike Bloomberg was here. And he was talking about there's a big city rising on the west side of Manhattan, and all the new buildings that are going in over there. There's also a new university system going in on Roosevelt Island. Has anybody figured out that water is a scarce resource now? I think we're talking about the investment in infrastructure in the city. We're talking about billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. And we're not talking about billions. We should be talking about billions dollars up here, and that's why I think that Mike Bloomberg or somebody from the city council really ought to be hearing what's going on. And I thank people that have been listening to us from the working group, and I thank you for coming down. But I don't think you can fix this. I think there needs to be more money, a lot more money thrown at this problem. The question, the Shandaken Tunnel, that's something else you could throw some money at. Is there something that could be done with the Shandaken Tunnel? Is it true that it could be encased so the dirty water isn't going into it the whole, what is it, 30 miles, 17 miles of Shandaken Tunnel where it comes out there?
Well, you got a lot, okay, you got a lot in there. Here's what I'll say, what's the amazing thing about all this development happening in New York is that water use is plummeting. And that's because people are replacing, with our help, we launched about 10 years ago now, the largest toilet replacement program in the country, replacing 7 gallons per flush with 1.5 gallons per flush. So actually, we're at slightly over 1 billion gallons a day annual average. Used to be up 1.4 or so. So we, even as our population has recovered, we're using less water, and I think that development is displacing.
The amount of money going into helping those projects to survive has to be incredible. And
Okay, well, I took your question as one about conservation, and I do think that's actually a very good story. In terms of amount of money we spend, I think I mentioned today, the over $2 billion project we have to fix this tunnel leak. There's also a lot of money, and $1.5 billion to date, we've spent on all our various watershed protection programs. So that is a very real commitment that we've made and have continued to make.
Hello. My name is Morgan Turner, and I own a property on Esopus Creek in Lower Kingston. The one phrase that I heard my client say earlier tonight, and that is mud or flood. And I'm here to represent the flood side of that equation. In 2005, we had a significant flood here in Ulster County. The water actually backed up 28 almost to Kenco. And my house, my daughter's house, had 38 inches of water inside of it. There was a big uproar, and between Senator Skimmerhorn and the other representatives, they said that the reservoir has to do something about this. This is out of control. And they did. And they came up with this thing which they had forgotten about, which was the waste channel. And the waste channel hadn't been opened since 1984, I think. They opened the waste channel, and since then, we have actually avoided most of the floods that came close, but didn't actually flood the houses down there on Orlando Street. Anyway, and when we had Irene, even though there was mass devastation above the reservoir, we only had 8 inches of water in the house instead of 38 inches. So the void in the reservoir did help. And what I see here, the end result of all this is what I see here is that you're stuck with the same problem that sort of we're stuck with. The problem is the mud. I mean, I don't think anybody here would worry if you were just dumping regular water into the reservoir, into the Esopus Creek. But it's muddy water. And it's not like you put that muddy water into the reservoir. Muddy water comes down. So what it comes down to here is we need stream restoration. This is what the problem is. And if you don't do that, this is just going to keep going on and on.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. And that's why one of the things that we are very much exploring is some reallocation of acquisition funding to that restoration work to make it happen faster and to a greater extent.
Just all the money that you're spending on those wastewater treatment plants and everything are really for nothing if you have a method reservoir.
No. We do build those where it makes a difference and where there's failing septic.
But you still, right now, you can't use the water in the reservoir, I'm sure.
Well,
it looks like chocolate milk. I mean, I assume you don't.
We are able to use it because East Basin is we help treat it with alum, and it's usable right now.
All right, I've been asked to let you know that they'd like to allow 5 more speakers, and that anyone who didn't get a chance to make a comment or wants to make a written comment anyway, I would guess, whether they've said it publicly or not, may submit them to be part of the record and should leave them with me or anyone who looks official. They'll tell you if they're not.
They can mail them in. They can mail them into the office.
Or mail them into the office.
County executive will make sure that they become part of the record.
All right, is that clear? Yes.
Hi, Jack Shanahan from Accord. There was a great turnout tonight, and I was with the group that was locked out because of the overflow. So if this issue was involved, please excuse me because I wasn't here to hear it. But I have two questions. One is about the dredging, and one is about flood control. Could you explain, or is there a reason why the upper reservoir of the Ashokan and the Schoharie Reservoir can't be mechanically dredged and the silt put into barges, and that material then used as a fertilizer or topsoil or whatever? It seemed like it'd be a very valuable commodity. It's the best soil of the mountains is being washed away. And the other thing is, in terms of the flood control, I was around in 1955 and I was around in 2005 and to this storm. And there was a long gap from 55 on. And matter of fact, right after 55, within 10 years, we had a drought. So flood control is forgotten about. But the 2005 flood in 2006 brought up the need for flood control, and I know the reservoir wasn't built for flood control. I saw the Knightville Dam, you're probably familiar with, over in Massachusetts, and this storm went up 90 feet in 3 hours, and it saved the people downstream in Westfield, Massachusetts, and in that area. This was almost a rerun in 1955. We had weeks and weeks of rain followed by a hurricane, and there was a lot of warning. So I'm just wondering why wasn't that followed up upon in terms of flood control? Thank you.
Okay, there are a few issues in there. I'll try to answer as many as I can in the allotted time. First of all, the turbidity we're talking about is suspended particles, so they can't, dredging out won't make a difference right now. But I think what you said in there about the droughts is something that no one has raised. We had one, in the early 90s as well, and it's something we have to be aware of. Certainly, that's not good for anybody as well, which is why we have to, have the best weather possible. One thing that was raised earlier, if you weren't in the room, you didn't hear it, is that the forecasting was not great in that week leading up to Irene. So the forecast was, I think, for a certain amount of rain, 3 to 8 inches or so, and we got a lot more. And everybody was caught by surprise. We did, release water from Ashokan and other reservoirs, and I think helped attenuate floods pretty significantly. Our data show 85% attenuation between what came into Ashokan and what left. So that does help. Dredging is an issue, or stream management, I should say, is a permitted issue from the state. So, Mark, I don't know if you want to raise that. We do it. They have governance over it. I don't know.
With respect to the stream management issues, again, we want to reiterate that the stream management plans that have been done in conjunction with the Soil and Water Conservation Districts and DEP are extremely important, and there's a lot of emphasis on those management plans. There's emphasis on trying to find the appropriate funding for those plans. We think we have identified that funding both through the federal government, through the grants that were announced by Governor Cuomo, and also by DEP looking to reallocate or reposition itself with respect to some of the funding required by this filtration avoidance determination. So those are important efforts we're undertaking. And again, I invite the county executive and the communities to work with DEC on excuse me, implementing these stream management plans that have been developed throughout the county.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Van Wagenen. I've lived here my entire life on the same piece of property that bordered Esopus Creek that my great-grandfather bought in 1870. I know Esopus Creek very well. We have 3/4 of a mile, and I want you to everybody has been talking about the damage associated with the 2 bad storms we had this past fall. However, The damage started in October 2010. And a lot of the damage to our shoreline was done during that time. In fact, the swimming hole that probably a lot of people here have swam in during their lifetime used to be 14 feet deep. Now it's filled in with material that was washed away from the creek bank further upstream, associated with this high flow rate that was reduced that you were releasing from the reservoir. So it doesn't make any difference to me. It does make a difference. I want clean water, but even high flows of clean water over an extended period of time makes a bad impact on the creek. All right. The rest of the damage to the creek was done during these storms. We lost hundreds of feet of shoreline, and I can't even tell what damage it was done below the water surface because the water's so dirty, you can't tell. It's too dangerous even to go by. Now, give a little dollar value on this, Mike. Your filtration plant is $10 billion. If you postpone that by 1 year and you have a bond rate of 5%, you're talking about $500 million that you have to work with to get the water clean coming into the reservoir rather than dumping it out the other end. So for $500 million for a few years, you could do a lot of stream restoration upstream of the reservoir. Thank you.
Comment or shall we move on?
Sure.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I thank Mr. Hine for that opportunity as well. In 2005, my home was flooded by about 2.5 feet the first floor. I'd like you gentlemen to stop your cars on your way home tonight and realize that you're not going home for about a month and a half. Okay? The devastating toll that it takes on the families, our friends, our employers is absolutely horrendous. It's heart-wrenching. It's just amazingly hard on all of us. In 2005, we were told that in a meeting that the problem would get better. That you would now be responsible for water management, which you weren't before. Unfortunately, the problem has gotten worse. I haven't seen any improvements. And with the last flood, not only did it take my backyard, but it also took all my hopes and all my dreams that it would get better and that it would be able to live there. I would just like to know if there is actually a plan in place where you can fix it. I think now that the problem has gotten so out of hand that you just don't know what to do about it. And as far as 2 release points, is there any way of getting another release point? 77% that the gentleman suggested. Is it possible to just leave it at 77%? And the other thing is, on the releasing of the water, I mean, what can we do about it? I mean, can we keep the water levels lower? It would be a godsend if we could just do that, just to figure out a way to maintain it so that the city could get their water and that we could keep our streams and our homes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leonard Driscoll, Town of Warsing. A lifetime resident of the Town of Warsing, and for the past 2 years, I was the Town of Warsing supervisor. I asked the previous commissioner, Cass Holloway, this commitment, which I'm going to ask Commissioner Strickland. Number 1 would be to maintain the reservoir level at 85% to alleviate the flooding when we have heavy downpours and long days of rain. Also, people in the Town of Warsing have been suffering with this mold problem for many years. It's time to rectify that problem this year, Commissioner, and solve before we have a serious health problem in Warsing. And as somebody said earlier, we need additional money for the buyout for the homes in Warsing, and I'd appreciate if you would look into that also. The other thing that I would like to address is that the tunnel is going to start to repair that in 2020. If Plan A fails, Commissioner, what's Plan B? And finally, a question for DEC. The Army Corps of Engineers and DEC need to get back on the drawing board and form a partnership to start dredging these streams before our next flood. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I think you've heard a number of percentages thrown out there. Right now, the interim protocol is trying to hit 90%. Happy to say that we finally did it after waiting for a long time. This weekend, someone said 77%. Mr. Distel mentioned 85%. I think these are the kind of things that deserve an airing as we go forward with the comment period on the interim protocol. Well, Warsing, we've, I think, mentioned many times about that fix in place. I think I'm hopeful that, you know, that's proceeding along pretty rapidly. Whether more money is needed or not will be determined. The tunnel in the last thing I'll say is, tunnel in 2020, we're starting now. We've already started, and we're going to break ground on those shafts in 2013, which is right around the corner for such a complex engineering project.
No. Last question.
As these issues have come to light, I've been doing some digging and talking to a lot of people regarding them. And in my discussions with a number of my contacts, I became aware that a substantial amount of turbidity in the Esopus is coming from, in particular, one or two locations along the tributaries to the upper Esopus, which happen to be on Forever Wild property. What efforts are being made to obtain access to those areas so the material can be either removed or stabilized in order to alleviate the turbidity entering the upper Esopus to begin with, because the only solution to stopping the turbidity downstream is stopping it at the source. Second question is, on the DEC website there is a section regarding reservoir releases that states that releases are to have no visible turbidity. Why is the DEP not being held to those regulations? And third, commercial development regulations from the DEC regarding stormwater state that water retention systems must be such that runoff from development project in volume and turbidity does not exceed that of the pre-developed conditions for a 25-year storm. Why is the DEP not held to similar regulations?
Well, you know, I would say in the watershed, we regulate stormwater. One problem with that regime you mentioned about pre-development runoff is that actually pre-development runoff in Catskills, as people pointed out, has a lot of suspended clay soils in it, so that's a problem. On your first point, I guess I'd ask you to just please speak with DEP staff, because those are just the kind of targeted locations that we want to identify and rectify as soon as possible. And Mark's mentioned working groups that DEC, DEP, Soil Water Conservation District, et cetera, are doing. Those are the very kind of sites that we want to identify so we can go in with a targeted solution. So I think you're onto something there. I think the third point was for you, Mark, if you want to address it.
I want to reiterate what Carter said concerning the stream management efforts, and it's extremely important for us to understand what's out there. And these teams have gone throughout the watershed and throughout other counties outside the watershed to identify areas that need attention. But I just want to emphasize that the kind of work that needs to be done in these streams is work that's done under the guidance of the experts. The Soil and Water Conservation Districts have that expertise, and we will support the work done that's consistent with those stream management plans. Going through dredging, which again has potentially huge repercussions for downstream riparian owners, is something that is undertaken only after very close scrutiny and study about what those impacts might occur, what those impacts might be. So stream management plans that have been developed throughout the watershed ought to be adhered to. There's funding that's available for those plans, and we ought to identify, as Carter said, those areas where stream management plans can have the best impact.
All right, I think that's the end, and I just want to thank this audience for a really wonderful bunch of questions. You were restrained in your emotion, but it came through, I think, loud and clear to all of them. But very thoughtful questions, great range. And again, if you have something in writing that you'd like to submit, would you raise hands if you have a card or something you can give to people, and Suzanne's back there, and any of the DEC staff, or Mike himself can take your comment. But you can get a card so you know exactly where to send it. Thank you for being here, and Mike, sure.
No, then I think we will.
Yeah.
I won't make anybody stay much longer. I know it's awfully hot. I do want to say a special thank you, though. Again, it's not easy to stand in here and take this, but it's also not easy to have suffered under it. So what I will tell you is a special thank you to Mark Gershman from the State DEC for coming. I really appreciate that. Again, Carter, I really appreciate the fact that you've come here and answered the questions that people have posed to you. It's made a big difference. And now the question really is going to be, where do we go from here? Are we going to have fundamental changes in the relationship between the New York City DEP and the people of our community, or not? That question is still yet unanswered. But again, I am hopeful. I'm the eternal optimist. We live in a wonderful place, and we don't want to see it ruined. We want to see fundamental change. So now the question really is, where do we go from here? The answer is yet to be determined when it comes to our relationship with New York City DEP, but we are hopeful. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming tonight.